Are enterprises quietly moving their workloads and data off of public cloud providers? Let's talk about it. So welcome back to the Cloud Computing Insider, where we talk about the truth of cloud computing and how to make it work for the enterprise. I'm your host, David Linthicum, author, speaker, B-list geek. Let's get started. This is a topic we've hit a few times here on the channel, and it's talking about the repatriation stuff for basically enterprises giving up on public cloud providers for a lot, or sometimes all of their existing applications and data sets, and moving it back on premises, back to their data centers, or sometimes to a colo provider, or sometimes to a managed service provider, or even sometimes to another cloud and on premises as well. So what's going on here is that we're seeing some new data points that are coming up. In other words, some things that are giving us a bit more of an accurate picture in terms of what's going on, in terms of who's doing what and how much repatriation is actually occurring out there. And I thought it was interesting to make another video and bring this up. But don't forget to check out Kicking Cloud to the Curb video, and I'll post it up there. When I focused on this particular topic, I'm focused on more nuanced reasons for repatriation. In other words, not looking at companies like 36 Signals with David Hansen and his big, very well-publicized migration from his cloud journey back to on-premises for his particular service offering. But enterprises out there that are moving very quietly and repatriating some applications and some data sets from public cloud providers to on-premises. So ultimately, there's a movement from cloud back to on-premises systems for enterprises out there. And we've saw indications of this for the last 4 or 5 years. In other words, we had the repatriation movement, and we had Dropbox that moved their infrastructure from cloud-based systems back to on-prem, and other examples of people who are able to move from cloud back to their data centers, and did so for good reasons. In other words, cost reasons, privacy reasons, security reasons, things like that. And so we knew this was going on. I think everybody just had a different opinion as to how much was going on. So we saw the things that were well publicized, David Hansen's use case, for example, but now we're starting to see other data as well. So recent study by Citrix suggests 25% of UK organizations and 42% of US firms are either considering moving or have already migrated at least half of their cloud-based workloads out of hyperscale public cloud platforms, as AWS, Microsoft, and Google, back to on-premises infrastructure. And this is another report by Flexera, finds that 89% of companies are now following a multi-cloud strategy, making use of public and private clouds, or the hybrid of two. So they're moving from a pure public cloud provider strategy, where all of their workloads, or as many as they could, were going to exist on a public cloud provider, typically a single public cloud provider. And so they're repatriating some of those things back to on-prem platforms, traditional data centers, and sometimes they're moving into a hybrid cloud. In other words, having aspects of the workloads and their data sets that run in the cloud and some of the stuff that runs on-prem. And sometimes they're leveraging a multi-cloud strategy, which is a mix of all of the above, so the on-prem, and then 2 or more different public cloud providers. And so we've talked about that a bunch of times here. So further evidence of this trend can be seen in the emergence of integration services from major cloud providers like Microsoft, Amazon, and Google, such as Azure Arc, AWS Outpost, and Google Anthos, which aim to help clients manage applications across hybrid and on-premises environments. So what they're looking at there is that the major public cloud providers are selling products that assist you in leveraging hybrid cloud infrastructures. Outpost, for example, is in essence a baby version of the AWS cloud, best way to put it, that runs on-prem. And you're able to leverage that and leverage subsets of AWS services on hardware that you own, and then able to leverage a public cloud provider when you need it. So they're seeing that movement as well. So what's going on here, we'll get more into this in a second, is that we're moving into a more heterogeneous world. So in other words, we're moving to ubiquitous computing, which we talked about here on the show. Ultimately, we're figuring out that not a single platform is going to be the right platform for everything out there we're looking to do. And so our ability to look at the right platform for the particular application, which is going to give us the right cost profile, is going to give us the right performance, give us the right security, the right privacy. All these sorts of things means that sometimes it's going to be cloud, but other times, more often than we think it's going to occur, it's not going to be cloud, and it's going to be an on-prem system or some other other type of platform substitute, such as edge computing, things like that. So that's what we're seeing right now as people are moving to heterogeneity. They're moving to simplistic single cloud deployment platforms into things that are more complex. And I think it's a step in the right direction. We're able to find and maximize the amount of value that's coming back to the business by leveraging the appropriate target platform. Sometimes it's going to be cloud, many times it's not. That's all we're saying here. So what else was in the news is that AWS was in hearings recently. They're addressing claims about its competition within the UK market during a Competition and Markets Authority CMA hearing, which I believe is a UK-based organization that's looking at the competitive nature of, in this case, cloud computing. And AWS contends in those hearings that it encounters competition not only from other cloud services, but also from on-premises IT solutions, traditional data centers. The hearing is part of a broader investigation into the competitive dynamics of the UK cloud industry. And during that hearing, AWS argued that some customers are incentivized to move back to on-prem systems due to various factors like financial considerations, technology access, data ownership, and this is despite the fact that they view it as a significant effort to do so. So even though obtaining a data center, building a data center, and the whole bunch of work that goes through that, buying your own hardware, hiring people to staff the data center, they're doing that anyway, even though there's significant barriers and cost in doing that, but they feel cost justified in the fact that they're ultimately going to be saving money. And so AWS is just putting that out in the hearing. Now keep in mind that in this case, AWS is defending itself probably to demonstrate to the organization in the hearings that they're not monopolistic and they're not anti-competitive and that there's many options out there besides them. And so that's why it was spun this way. So just kind of keep that in mind. I think a lot of the articles that I saw out there where AWS admits that people are moving off their cloud. I'm not sure that's the case. I think that they were making a case by the fact that there are lots of different options out there, certainly other cloud providers, but other options that in terms of traditional approaches, edge-based computing, things like that, that some enterprises are exercising as well. So don't make a bigger deal out of it than it is, but it is showing the fact that AWS admits that there's a good deal of repatriation going on and people are using that as an option to move off public cloud providers, including theirs. So what about some other news? Well, according to a recent survey by Barclays, 83% of enterprise CIOs plan to repatriate some workloads in 2024, a notable increase from previous years. That's a lot. However, Gartner has pointed out, just to defend the cloud industry, that while cloud repatriation is happening, it might not be as widespread as some of the narratives suggest. And they talk about strategic cloud and non-cloud deployments like hybrid cloud environments moving to multi-cloud instead of full-scale repatriation. I kind of agree with that. I think that there is a push out there, a narrative out there that there's a ton of repatriation going on. And there is. There's a lot of repatriation as people are normalizing many of the bad decisions they made in the early days of cloud computing. In many instances, some of those applications and data sets should have never been on cloud. And in moving them to cloud and your willingness to normalize those workloads and normalize those data sets so they're able to take advantage of the features and functions of cloud and therefore run in a very efficient and optimized way has led to these huge cloud bills. Because if we're not localizing the applications to the native services on the cloud and the native performance management, the native optimization managers on cloud providers, then we're just going to get a big bill at the end of the month because it's going to certainly host our stuff. But if our stuff is written in an efficient way that doesn't take advantage of their optimized resources, they're going to pass that along to us with large bills, just like what the power company would do or the water company would do. If we use utility services, plug very inefficient appliances into our house, it's basically the same thing. And so companies are saying, well, that was wrong. And I'm getting a huge bill, as I mentioned in my book, probably 2.5 times what people thought they were going to be paying. And if I'm going to localize and optimize that application for the cloud provider, that's going to cost me $5 million across the applications to do so, where it's probably going to be a much cheaper solution to move it back on-prem and therefore pay for only the hardware, which has gotten real cheap, and therefore I'm going to be able to get off cheaper in doing the repatriation. And that's what we're seeing now for the most of them. The ones I'm working on are very much like that. So in other words, it's too expensive to change the applications, to modernize the applications in place on the cloud providers. Therefore, I'm either going to have an under-optimized environment that's going to send me huge cloud bills, or I'm just going to take plan B, move it back where I ported it from, in this case on-prem, and pay a lot less money in many cases based on those alternatives and based on that particular situation. So the other thing to mention is shift to multi and hybrid cloud solutions. Also has been something that's been going on probably for the last 7 years. Certainly we saw multi-cloud grow. So a lot of people have taken my multi-cloud class out on LinkedIn Learning, and you kind of see, based on the explosion of interest in that a lot of organizations are moving in that direction. And that typically means that they're leveraging more than one public cloud provider, but it also means they may be, and usually are, leveraging on-prem resources such as private clouds and traditional systems, legacy systems, mainframe systems, and then mixing them and putting them under the same architectural framework, which I think is a step in the right direction. Our hybrid cloud solutions, which many people are taking as a default position, where they're taking the workloads and the data sets that run on the cloud, and they're partitioning them and running aspects of them on-prem and aspects of them in the cloud, perhaps putting the data in the cloud and the processing on-prem, or vice versa, or splitting the application up in functionality, or running some applications in the cloud and some applications on-prem. So we're seeing those sorts of solutions now, which are compromises between running everything on cloud, which was kind of the push 10 years ago, if you remember, cloud everything, to running hybrid multi-cloud solutions where we're leveraging heterogeneity to find the platforms that are going to bring us the most optimized value back to the business. And that's what we should do with technology. So why is this happening? Well, several factors are driving this. First and foremost, cost management means that while the cloud solutions have been marked as cost efficient, and they did so in the past. I remember the mantra was CapEx versus OpEx. You pay for only what you get, what you use. And therefore, cloud's going to provide a tremendous cost advantage. The reality was very different that enterprises found out. And I wrote about this in my book as well. They often found that over time, the cumulative cost of cloud services can outweigh those of traditional on-prem systems. In other words, it was much more expensive to operate something in the cloud than it was where the applications and workloads came from. And what happened over the last 10 years is that the cost of hardware, certainly the cost of storage and processing systems, traditional stuff, commoditized processing, commoditized storage, has dropped tremendously in price, almost like a 45-degree angle. So therefore, that kind of threw a monkey wrench in the cloud business model, where if I'm going to sell you something per use, that it's always going to be cheaper. They can't make those promises now, and typically moving things into the cloud. Of course, your experience may vary and your use cases may vary, is going to be more expensive than the on-prem systems. And that's just the reality of it. Now, we may move to cloud for different reasons. We need the agility aspect of it, the scalability aspect of it. They may have certain applications and ecosystems that we want to run in the cloud. AI, for example, it's very turnkey in the cloud. You get the ecosystem on demand. Lots of reasons you use the cloud. You're just going to pay for it. And so long-term, companies are seeing that as being cost prohibitive. And they're taking the plan B, either repatriating their application to the cloud. And what we don't hear about a lot of is just applications that are not going to move. They may have been slated to move, 5-6 years ago. And then lately they said, we're just not going to move those applications to the cloud. So that's not repatriating. That's not moving to the cloud and pushing them back. But it is making a decision not to leverage the cloud platforms in those instances. And that's interesting. The hardware got cheap. I just talked about that, as I pointed out 100 times in my last book, real cheap. And ultimately that blew a huge hole in the business model of cloud computing when it came to the cost benefit of it. And people took a long time to realize that, but suddenly we started getting some data back from the enterprises that are strongly leveraging cloud computing. And they almost, 99% were complaining about the amount of cost that was going into leveraging public cloud platforms. Data security and sovereignty, we're looking at growing regulatory pressure around data protection, such as GDPR in Europe. Enterprises are becoming increasingly concerned about data sovereignty, in other words, rules in terms of data, how it needs to be kept within the country, and security. So on-prem systems provide companies with more control. They can go out and touch those systems, things like that. I don't think that cloud computing is necessarily always not going to be the solution to leverage. You can certainly leverage things like sovereign clouds. We talked about microclouds a few shows ago and why those things exist. But it comes down to, I think, and this happens in Europe a lot, that the companies don't trust the cloud as being able to protect their data, and they're looking for more direct control of the data. So they pull it back on-prem. Performance and controls refers to the applications that require high performance and low latency. So this is seen in finance and gaming. These systems may benefit from proximity. So in other words, having a on-prem system that's closer to where the users are going to exist or their customers are going to exist may have an advantage for them in terms of performance latency. One of the problems with cloud is that it leverages the open internet as the primary way that it communicates with people who are using the cloud services. And as you know, people have been using the internet. It's kind of bursty, can be slow at times. And obviously people's internet connections may vary, depends on what part of the world they're in, things like that. So what they're saying here is we're going to host it closest to where it's going to be consumed, and that's going to provide us with better performance. That's probably true. Customizability and flexibility refers to the fact that on-premise systems often provide more significant opportunities for customization. Since I have the hardware, I can control the hardware. You can't do that with cloud. You can't walk into their data center and take a hardware system out of the rack and start customizing it for your particular needs. You certainly can do that if you own the server and own the data center. And I think some companies are seeing advantages in that for, again, some applications. Technological advancements, referring to recent advancements on-prem technologies such as hyperconverged infrastructures, are starting to emerge where they have very powerful, very efficient, very turnkey infrastructures you can leverage that exist within your data centers. Hybrid and multi-cloud strategies are starting to emerge. We already talked about that. And finally, and often not talked about, vendor dissatisfaction, meaning many enterprises are not happy with major cloud providers due to issues like service outages, egress fees, which they view as junk fees. We talked about that on this show as well. Lack of transparency around pricing and service level commitments, and they can prompt businesses to rethink their cloud reliance and explore other alternatives, such as on-prem, edge computing, managed service providers, colo providers, things like that. So enterprise user, should this be a consideration for you? Should you look at some of your applications that exist on cloud providers as being potentially better to relocate back to your data center? And if you don't have a data center, maybe move it to a colo provider or a managed service provider. Yeah, it's always worth a consideration. Certainly if you're not happy with the value you're getting back from your cloud service provider. And sometimes it's not necessarily going to be their fault. In other words, you move something into the cloud and it's running very inefficiently, therefore you're getting a big bill. That's kind of on you, as well as perhaps your cloud provider should have explained that better when you made the relocation in the cloud. I did see a lot of providers selling the fact they're trying to get as many cloud applications migrated to the cloud, and don't worry about changing it, just lift it and shift it. And that was kind of the mantra years back. And we knew as architects that was going to be a mistake because of the reasons we just went through in the show. So if you have those, it may be a consideration. But the biggest impact this is going to have is rethinking and reevaluating the use of cloud platforms as a default for everything out there. Certainly we're going through the AI stuff right now. There's reasons to leverage cloud platforms for AI. You get the built-in ecosystem. It's more turnkey, path of least resistance to getting your AI systems out there. But in an operational state, it's going to cost you a lot of money. Certainly if you're leveraging GPU-based systems versus perhaps owned hardware that exists in your data center. And also the other concerns, privacy, security, sovereignty, everything we just mentioned. So this is nothing really against cloud. This is the fact of the matter is that we're rethinking the value of all platforms, including cloud. And we're not discounting anything. Everything has the potential for being the optimized platform that we're going to be able to leverage to run our applications, run our workloads, run our data sets. And it's going to be different platforms for different use cases. I think that's the reality of it. And that really has been the case all along. So when we start running to one platform or running to another platform, whether it's cloud computing or something else, often we're not looking at the bigger picture. We're not looking at the business use cases. We're not looking at the architecture. We're not looking at maximizing the value that's coming back to the business. We're just looking at trends. And I think that can get us into trouble very quickly. And in many instances here, we're undoing hype-driven trends that I think got a lot of enterprises in a situation where they put applications and data sets where they probably shouldn't have been put. And so now we're fixing that. And that's what we're seeing right now in some of these data sets. And I think what's happening is that we're not having this big, bang approach where suddenly we're giving up on cloud. Very quiet and very nuanced migrations are occurring in the back, but a lot are starting to occur, and it's starting to pick up momentum. And so I'll report on it here and I'll let you know how it goes. And I think that's not necessarily a bad thing. We're normalizing the use of technology. We're maximizing business value by finding the right appropriate platform for the workloads for the data sets that we're running. Nothing wrong with that. That's all I have for you this week. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, don't forget to check out my InfoWorld blog. Check out my courses out on LinkedIn Learning. Check out my generative AI architecture course out on GoCloudCareers. If you're not joining us there, you should be. If you're getting into the generative AI stuff, we're spending a lot of time and having a lot of fun on that, working case studies, getting into the nuances, talking about current events. And so join us there if that's going to be your career direction. Also, don't forget to check me out on LinkedIn, check me out on X, and don't forget my book, Insider's Guide to Cloud Computing, available where finer books are sold. So until next week, you guys take good care. Cheers.